Chapter 10. Character Creation. Choose a race. The skin tone dial ranged from milk pale to inky dark. The nomenclature changed from elf to dark elf when I spun the dial to truly black skin. That was a bit on the nose. The gnome had suspenders holding up droopy pants, with a purple tie, topped by the usual pointed beanie you'd seen on a garden gnome, and his skin tone dial seemed to stay in the lighter range. He wore a beard over cheerful pink cheeks. I scrolled the screen sideways, browsing the races to see what was most appealing, until I noticed the racial bonuses listed below the images, and I started over at the elf listing. Racial bonuses, elves. The sample elf avatar wore a pimp-ass suit with a fedora, +2 logic attribute, +3 focus trait. Gnomes. The gnome wore suspenders with a purple tie and beanie, +2 deceit attribute, +2 intuition trait. Orcs. Dressed in a tunic and rough breeches, his skin tone dial stayed in the gray-green range. Big, intimidating for sure, with those tusk-like teeth protruding from the lower jaw, a piggish face, and beady eyes. They looked innately mean. +1 intimidation attribute, +1 vitality, attribute +2 brawn trait, -1 logic roll. Ogres. The ogre had a workman's overalls in muddy brown, contrasting with his range of sickly green skin tones available. He didn't look particularly smart, something in the eyes, but he didn't have the mean expression of the orc. +2 vitality attribute, +1 survival trait, +1 brawn trait, -1 versatility roll. Humans. The humans wore fairly typical suits, with all the usual skin tones found in the real world. Pretty average and boring. Probably not a good smokescreen, really. Too expected. +2 versatility, +2 adaptation. Halflings. These guys seemed like shorter, bulkier versions of the humans, with the proportions just a little off. But again, they sported all the common skin tones on the dial. To me, they appeared nearly like children dressed up in suits and ties, and I dismissed them out of hand as I scrolled by. +2 versatility, +3 adaptation, -1 vitality attribute roll. Goblins. These ones looked like the ogres had been left too long out of sunlight, with pale green skin under their mismatched suits, as if they shopped the thrift stores and bought the cheapest items in their size. I didn't like their short stature paired with their resentful faces. +2 deceit, +3 survival, -1 vitality attribute roll. Gnomes wore the twisted features of the naturally deceitful, and goblins appeared no better. While the former grinned, the latter scowled. I analyzed the data, trying to set aside prejudices kicking in based on the facial expressions of the various races. Skills and attributes were what counted. My inner voice sent a single thought: watch those fucks. A smile meant shit when they had a knife to your throat. Elves, logic, and focus. Good to have. Ogre and orc were out. I couldn't imagine a life as a big, dumb... whatever. They reminded me of some of the thick-necked Gunthers who worked for the Dawn, the ones who stood in the corner and never spoke. The muscle. And muscle amounted to cannon fodder. While they might become powerful serving as protection at higher levels, their statures and dumb expressions might make them targets early on. Humans had no negatives but lacked any strong advantages. But if I wanted to disappear, they'd be my last choice. No time to get comfortable. Halflings were versatile and adaptive. That was cool. They might have been a good choice. I wagered they boasted concealment skills, even if the system didn't list them outright. I'd kept my ass in one piece using those kinds of skills. Been trained to do it. Hiding in plain sight had been the summary of my life as an operator and informant. I reviewed the options again, letting them soak into my gray matter while I considered their pros and cons. Don't overthink the little shit. The family has no idea you're here. Just keep it that way until it's time to send the ultimate message. Focus on the goal. Dig up the dirt. Interrupt enough to let them know you're no pushover, but not enough to do serious damage and call for more retribution than you've already earned. Then disappear. I narrowed it down to elf and halfling. The exotic, handsome facial options of the elves attracted me for a moment, but that was foolish ego, and it would get me noticed, maybe even killed. I needed the flexibility of the adaptation and versatility traits far more than I needed an ego boost. And what purpose was there to being a hot guy in the game? It wasn't a dating sim. I let out a snort of derision at my own expense. Good thing the halflings weren't literally half the height of a human in the game. Just short. Maybe enough to be overlooked. That's what I was going for. Literally a low profile. So I chose the halfling, then toggled the gender to female. Chapter 11. Well, even with a round face, I felt it was quite pleasing as I tilted my head side to side to examine myself in the interface pane. Human enough not to disgust myself, and that thought made me chuckle. If we were going opposite, I probably should really make it so. I spun the skin tone dial to fair, but not fairy tale princess pale. Shiny blonde hair, long enough for a ponytail to keep it off my shoulders. Last thing I wanted was to fuss with it all the time, which was a sure tell I wasn't used to girlishly long hair. I was about to second-guess that bit about women playing with their hair, then decided the ponytail was safe either way. Blue eyes to go with the wholesome girl-next-door look. Nice. Cute, but not ready to adorn any digital glamour covers. Clothes. I scrolled along the options, looking for something decent, not too upper class nor too poor. I hadn't realized how little I knew about women's adornments until then. I tried on a dress, twirled, then realized two things. One, I was not a twirler, and two, that skirt was not the kind of outfit to fight in, let alone try sit without flashing the world. I settled on something akin to yoga pants and a simple blouse before my instinct to switch to a man and be done with it took hold. The outfit was flexible, and probably suitable for almost any woman. Although I was no fashion expert, I'd seen women from every class dressed similarly in the real world, so it would do until I needed something else. Besides, it looked good on my avatar. Nothing flashy. If the skin-hugging pants drew wandering eyes to my backside, that meant they weren't focused on my face. Less memorable was good. I added a backpack, wondering why women used the miniature ones instead of something more practical. Carrying a purse on my shoulder seemed awkward, and I didn't want to give myself away. Relieved that the attire and physical appearance pieces were behind me, I moved on to the tab for attributes. Each time I clicked the little plus sign next to a given attribute, a six-sided die bounced across my field of view from left to right. Then the number popped up on the given line in my heads-up display, or HUD. Renata Cobb, Halfling, Level 1. You have not selected a class. Rank, Nobody. You're a nobody. Brawn, 1. Determination, 3. Deceit, 4. Intimidation, 2. Logic, 5. Movement speed, 2. Persuasion, 3. Recovery, 1. Stamina, 1. Vitality, 4. 1 racial penalty. Versatility, 7, plus 1 racial bonus. Professions. You have not learned any professions. Action skills. You have not learned any action skills. Traits. Survival, 3, plus 2 racial trait. Intuition, 4, plus 3 racial trait. Focus, 1. Adaptation, 1. Combat skills. You couldn't fight your way out of a paper bag with a machete. Haha, game. Make fun now, but I'll work my way up. I couldn't help but notice the way my dimples accentuated my cheeks when my lips curved to accentuate the rolling of my eyes in response to the system message about my lacking combat prowess. When I brushed a few loose strands of hair from my eyes, a flash of something dark in the reflection on my inner wrist caught my eye. Brow furrowed, I turned my hand over. I hadn't selected a tattoo, yet there was an infinity symbol marked on that tender flesh, dark and a little blurred at the edges, as if it had been there forever. The blue veins ran beneath the tattoo, just as they would in real life. Odd I hadn't been given options about that, but I had to get on with it, so I did. Huh. I turned on my little boot-style shoes, no way was I trying to learn to get around in high heels, and jerked open the door. Warning, once you leave this starting room, you will be unable to return. Your selections will be set. Are you sure you're ready to head into River City? I focused on yes. Chapter 12. I strolled onto the street from the lobby of the shabby starting building, trying not to gape at the swarm of people bustling on the thoroughfare. You have discovered the Halfling District, plus 25 XP. A little bubble with bare bones information popped up over the head of each individual, drawing my focus. While I was anything but an avid gamer, I'd tooled around a few VMMORPGs in my life, and I had to admit the less obtrusive cloud shapes enhanced the experience. Their low profile and the way they popped off to one side was less distracting, and I could guess how that bit of ingenuity would be a boon in combat. As I darted looks all around like a tourist in Times Square, another difference stood out. Player and NPC icons were indistinguishable from each other. No names, just levels and races, some of which hadn't been offered in the character creation screen. Maybe that was an indicator they were NPCs, but for all I knew, there were ways to change a player's race once they'd achieved certain accolades, or they shelled out for it after reaching a certain level. Whatever the case, they went about their business as if newcomers were commonplace, or as if they hadn't noticed me at all, and I supposed that wasn't unexpected. Just like New York and other big cities. Someone even muttered, "Fucking noob," and detoured around me with a shoulder bump. I might as well have hung an old-fashioned camera around my neck like in old-time movies. Note to self, try blending instead of gawking. But how could I? The environment was something to behold, the details refined, every motion fluid, textures replicated the outside world to a T. I forced my gaze down, took a few steps, then paused at the corner to let an ogre pass lest he bump me into the street. Good thing, too, because as he crossed, a wagon full of crates pulled by a team of beasts that reminded me of the Clydesdale horses from old-school beer commercials reared to a halt. I doubted they'd have stopped for me. Their driver tipped me a wink as they passed through the intersection. Weird. A second ogre brought up their six on a big draft horse. I strolled across once the procession had passed. When I spotted a fellow halfling leaning on a shoeshine station, I zigzagged through the crowd without rushing my pace. It wasn't easy containing myself when his inspection bubble displayed the purple icon indicating he was a mentor, and I didn't want him to wander off before I made my way through the pedestrian sea. Pausing at the foot of the stand, I coughed discreetly into my tiny hand to catch the mentor's attention. He brought his gaze around, then shoved his hands in his pockets. When he didn't speak, I took the honors. "Excuse me, how much for information?" He eyed me up and down, adjusting his cap as he thought it over. No doubt there was a standard amount, but he took his sweet time before finally chattering in a low voice. "Well, missy, judging by the looks of you, I doubt your bag is bulging with bucks." Although it boasted a small stack of currency, I gave my best embarrassed shrug of an impoverished lady. "But I've been known to help out a newcomer or two in my time. Maybe I can offer you a quest. No one with money asks the price right off the bat, huh? But I could offer a bit of walking around money in addition to information if you complete a task or two for me. Nothing dangerous, of course." He leaned in, one bushy eyebrow slanting to cause deep wrinkles in his forehead. "Wouldn't dream of putting a pretty halfling at level 1 in a bad situation." "Right. Sure you wouldn't." "What do you think?" My brow furrowed. How could I judge an offer when he hadn't stated the parameters? Plus, being called Missy for the first time was a little more disorienting than I would have expected. I adopted an assertive tone. "I think I need more information. You haven't said what you expect me to do." "True that, true. But it's nothing complicated. You deliver something for me to some important people, and when you return, I'll answer 3 questions for you at no charge. That sound fair?" He didn't wait for a response. Instead, he dropped one eyebrow, then cocked the other as his gaze turned to eye the crowd passing behind me. "Sounds fair to me. How do I know you'll even be here when I'm done?" Suspicion. Nature. He chuckled, gesturing to the hand-painted sign nailed to the riser beneath the chair on the stand. "See that?" "Vogel's shoeshine," I muttered aloud. A stack of newspapers blaring a headline about tooth fairies sat in a bin next to the unoccupied elevated seat. I ignored it. "Right, and I'm Vogel. This is my place." Upon his mentioning of his name, the bubble cast over his head expanded to include it. So the game provided information only as it was offered until my focus skill was realized. That was interesting. I would have had to ask for someone's name in the real world, so why not emulate it in that way too? God knew they'd done so in Eve.